After my Netherlands trip, I decided I need to have more international travel in my life, so I hopped on a plane to the UK. I was there visiting friends, doing some family history, and honestly, mostly just riding trains. Lots and lots of trains. In this video, we'll be visiting Reading, Birmingham, Aberystwyth, and Cardiff. The next video will include Manchester, Edinburgh, Coatbridge, and London, so make sure you're subscribed. I'm doing this trip entirely car-free, so I'll be going by foot and transit. This will end up taking me to the most walkable places, where we can talk urbanism. I'm Alex, I love trains, and this is a channel all about visiting interesting places and talking about some urbanism along the way. To get to the UK, I took the Max Yellow from my place to the 300 bus, all the way to the Calgary International Airport. After flying across the world, of course with a window seat, we arrived a bit early and circled around above the clouds for a bit. After deboarding the plane, I followed a crowd down an escalator and under the tarmac, which was pretty cool. Then I followed the wayfinding to the Elizabeth line, went down more escalators, and hung out on the station platform. I had to get off at Hayes and Harlington, then off again at Maidenhead. Maidenhead was fun for watching trains go by, and, still on the Elizabeth line, I eventually made it to Reading. I planned for a bit of a time buffer here so I could walk around town. So, what did I see in Reading? Well, I liked this map full of the bus routes, and this wide walkable street was fantastic. And that's about all I was able to see in Reading because I had to catch my next train. This train was a cross-country train, which will take me to Birmingham. And the train? I don't know, man. Not the nicest one I took on this trip, but it is still better than flying or driving. Even though Birmingham was a changeover, I wanted to see a little bit more there, so I planned for 2 hours. And wow, they're really doing the walkable street thing here. Walkable streets aren't just quieter, less smelly, and more spacious for people, but they also just let you enjoy things like shops, architecture, and some good food. So I wandered, I watched trams, and I checked out the architecture too. Birmingham was definitely somewhere I'd like to return to. There's a lot of construction going on, enhancing public squares, streets, and plazas. So maybe in a couple years, I'll do a dedicated trip just to see what's going on. But this was a beautiful city, and maybe next time I'll try their take on the California burrito, or maybe Tim Hortons. But alas, we're off. I was now on my way to Aberystwyth, Wales. Remember, I left Calgary in the evening, arrived in London nearing noon, and then traveled on for many more hours. On the train, I chatted with a couple of people who thought it was funny how much I liked the British trains. They might not be the envy of the world, but hey, this Calgarian is very jealous. I arrived in Aberystwyth, greeted by my friends Grace and Chloe, who were kind enough to host me while I was visiting. In the morning, I took off to do some exploring. First, this bike parking? Very nice. Pretty plants are always nice, and so is interesting architecture. Saw a little brutalism on the university grounds, and a great view with some very cute sheep. And then there was this incredible library. I spent a long time in the National Library of Wales, which is a lot more than just a library. I found art exhibits, a very interesting section about Welsh media, and some very knowledgeable staff who taught me a bit about Welsh culture. Something I especially loved was that they had these stools that could be carried around and moved to where people would like to sit, enhancing the accessibility of the institution. But maybe my favorite thing were these headphones. Slip them on and they'll play the audio from whichever part of the exhibit you're looking at. This might be on par or maybe even above windows in museum as my favorite museum things. Walking down the streets here, I wonder what people at home are so worried about with density. These streets are still quiet, pleasant, and beautiful. These 3-story duplexes honestly don't feel that much more dense than the single-family homes in Calgary. The lack of front car garages definitely helps as well, adding greenery and character to the area. Now down to the beach. I don't like telling another place what to do, but a fully pedestrianized waterfront would be incredible here. For lunch, I got my first fish and chips in the UK, right here on the beach. I gotta say, these birds have great taste in food, too. Something else I loved about Aberystwyth was this cool milk vending machine. First, you get a bottle, then you fill it with chocolate milk. Or regular milk, I guess, if you're like that. They also had eggs here. And this has nothing to do with anything, but this person had a meme in their front window that made me laugh. So thank you. Since there's a steam train to be ridden, I had to ride it. Interestingly, this is when we learned there was a rally car event going on the next day. So as we boarded the steam train, we got to see some pretty cool cars. and now for the train ride. I don't think I've ever seen a more beautiful valley. So I'm just going to let some footage roll. Please enjoy. At the end of the train ride was this waterfall. Since this is a tourist destination, there are many ecological concerns which are managed by this fare gate. I thought this was a pretty simple solution. Unfortunately, I pack light, so I decided not to get one of these souvenirs, but I really, deeply, honestly regret it. These trains are pretty cool. While in the UK, I wanted to make the most of every day. Going to sleep, I wondered where else I ought to explore. At 3 a.m., I woke up and booked a ticket for a 6:40 departure to Cardiff, Wales. Here, let me read this part from my journal. The bus gave me quite a lovely tour of the small towns that dot the coast, connected by narrow, winding roads. A gentleman on board educated me on Welsh life. He was also quite curious about Canada. He told me how frustrating it was to learn English because it has so many silent letters. Welsh, on the other hand, has one pronounce every letter. It was about a 2-hour bus ride. For another 2 hours, I took the train from Carmarthen to Cardiff Central. The train was quite busy. I'd later learned there was a big motocross event. Now, listen guys, I loved Cardiff. Like properly loved it. The color scheme of the buses, amazing. The walkable streets, amazing. The people, amazing. Let me read from my journal again. My intention had been to visit the Welsh National Museum first, so I plugged it into Google Maps and started walking. Somewhere along the way, I missed a turn and wound up closer to the Cardiff Museum. I figured I'd go there first instead. And boy, am I glad I did. Upon entering the museum, I was greeted by 2 staff members. We chatted for a bit before I went off to see the museum. When I'd finished my brief tour, the museum wasn't very big, I returned and continued my conversation with them about how lovely I found their city. Of course, being me, I brought up the walkability and pedestrianization of the area. They were quite happy to hear it, and mentioned there'd been significant opposition, but that it's been great for the city. Building beautiful spaces, walkable cities, where people can wander and explore and discover new people and places, these are all choices we make. In the basement of the Cardiff Museum, they had posters about the choices the city made. And one that I personally loved was this one about the Hook Road. In this instance, 1,500 homes were going to be destroyed for the personal car. That's the homes of 5,000 people, just gone, in service of the least efficient mode of urban travel. In 1973, the City Council finally voted against the plan. These are choices. In my hometown, Calgary, Canada, we faced a similar choice around the same time that Cardiff made this choice to not go forward with the Hook Road. Calgary called our plan the Downtown Penetrator, which, who comes up with this? This sounds like something an evil villain would come up with. This Downtown Penetrator would have destroyed our riverfront. And I'm glad that we didn't go forward with this. I would far rather this along our river than this. On the advice of my new friends at the Cardiff Museum, I made my way to the market, grabbed a Welsh cake, delicious by the way, and then ventured onward to Cardiff Castle. I really liked that part of the castle grounds were just open to the public, while others were sectioned off for a paid museum experience. Something I've talked about a bit already is the accessibility in museum, and here's another way that could be done. Having cards featuring a variety of languages allows visitors from all over the world to learn the local history. As a side note, I want a library like this. Looking back toward downtown Cardiff, it was cool to see how cities change over the years. A castle with the oldest parts dating back to the 12th century. With buildings built between then and now, cities grow and change, new buildings, new people, and new stories, and it all makes a place that much more interesting. On my way to the Welsh National Museum, I saw a wedding, crowds for the sporting events, and some incredible architecture. My main reason for coming to this museum was the BBC exhibit, particularly the Doctor Who stuff. And did you know the BBC launched a TV show for deaf children in 1955? I thought that was pretty awesome. The rest of the museum was also worth the visit. Notably, there were fewer stolen goods here than at the British Museum. And maybe no stolen goods at all. Honestly, I didn't check. After a quick walk around the university campus, I started walking back downtown. And you know, I think this road could use a dedicated bike lane. Looking for lunch, I wandered through this beautiful park, took a detour through some arcades, and found myself at this busy mall. But I'm not going to eat at Shake Shack, don't worry. It's overrated, and we all know the best milkshakes are at around the bend back home anyways. After checking back in with my friends at the Cardiff Museum, they recommended I wander on down to the bay. I saw a train and said hi to the good folks of the 501st, and obviously paid my respects at Yanto's Shrine. Before returning to the train, I took in the variety of architecture featured here. Wandering along the River Taft, I took note of the variety of housing in the area, the people enjoying the water, and traveling using a variety of modes. I noted a road earlier that could benefit from a separate cycling lane, but I also think it should be noted when that isn't necessary. Quiet streets like this can host cycling on the road thanks to traffic calming. Note how close the trees are to the road, the continuous sidewalks or raised crosswalks, the narrow road with a textured strip down the center. And even the street parking contributes to the traffic calming. After some strike-related delays, we were on our way back to Aberystwyth. The train ride was eventful. I was gently harassed by some very drunk Welsh women, but at least they respected the boundaries I set. Sadly, I do think I sat in some white wine, which definitely ruined my pants, but hey, Cardiff was amazing. By far, my favorite city I've ever visited, and I will definitely be back. And I will be back here next week when we visit Manchester, Coatbridge, Edinburgh, and London.